Qua. The reason avoidants always come back differently is not because they suddenly changed, it's because you did. At the moment an avoidant pulls away, their nervous system finally feels relief. Distance feels safe, silence feels calm. But as time passes, something unexpected begins to happen. The absence that once felt peaceful slowly turns unfamiliar, then unsettling. At Avoidant, what you're witnessing isn't love returning, it's loss being registered. Avoidants don't chase connection in the moment. They process it later, when the emotional pressure is gone and their defenses drop. When you stop explaining, stop reaching out, and stop trying to be understood, you remove the emotional noise that overwhelmed them. And in that quiet space, memory gets louder. They begin replaying moments, not the conflicts, but the safety, the consistency, the way you showed up without demanding anything in return. That's why when avoidants come back, they don't come back casual. They come back cautious, curious, and changed in tune. Because now they're not running from closeness. They're running from the realization that they might have lost something real. And that shift is what makes their return feel different every single time. After an avoidant pulls away, their mind doesn't instantly miss you the way you expect. At first, there's a sense of control, like they finally escaped emotional intensity. Their thoughts slow down, their body relaxes, and they convince themselves that distance means clarity. But this calm is temporary. Once the pressure is gone, the mind starts filling in the silence. Without constant emotional input, their brain begins replaying unresolved moments, especially the ones where they felt seen without being trapped. Avoidants are wired to suppress attachment needs, not erase them. So instead of longing, what appears first is irritation, restlessness, or curiosity. They check your absence more than your presence. They wonder why you're quiet, why you didn't chase, why the familiar reassurance isn't there. That's when the internal conflict begins. One part wants safety in distance, while another starts questioning whether pulling away actually solved anything. And that mental tug-of war is what slowly pulls their attention back toward you. The mistake that pushes avoidance further isn't saying the wrong thing, it's saying too much. When an avoidant pulls back, their nervous system is already overwhelmed. Long messages, emotional explanations, and repeated attempts to fix things don't feel loving to them, they feel invasive. Even if your words are kind, their mind translates intensity as pressure. The more you try to clarify, the more they feel the need to escape. Avoidants don't process emotions in real time. They need space before understanding what they feel. And when that space is filled with demands for reassurance or closure, their instinct is to shut down completely. Another hidden mistake is abandoning your own rhythm, waiting by the phone, rearranging your life, or signaling that your stability depends on them. That imbalance quietly confirms their fear of closeness. What actually keeps an avoidant nearby is emotional steadiness, not emotional urgency. When you stay grounded, they don't feel trapped, and that changes everything. Silence affects avoidance so deeply because it removes the one thing they subconsciously rely on, emotional predictability. When you go quiet, there's no pressure, no confrontation, no demand for closeness, and at first that feels comfortable to them. But over time, that comfort turns into uncertainty. Avoidants are used to controlling distance, not losing access. Silence takes that control away without a single word, without messages to react to. Their mind starts filling in gaps. They wonder if you moved on, if you stopped caring, or if they misread how replaceable they were. Silence forces reflection because there's nothing to push against. It also breaks the emotional loop where they pull away and you chase, which is the dynamic their nervous system expects. When that pattern disappears, their sense of safety is disrupted. That's why silence isn't passive, it's powerful. It creates space for avoidance to feel the weight of absence, something they rarely allow themselves to feel while still in control. The power shift they don't expect happens the moment you stop centering your emotional world around their reactions. Avoidants are accustomed to being the one who regulates distance, deciding when to engage and when to disappear. When you quietly redirect your focus back to yourself, that familiar balance collapses. There's no confrontation, no ultimatum, just a noticeable change in energy they can't name. Suddenly, they're not the emotional authority anymore. Your calm independence challenges the unspoken rule that they set the pace while you wait. This isn't about dominance. It's about self-possession. When you no longer seek validation or reassurance from them, they're forced to reassess your value outside of availability. That uncertainty pulls at them, because avoidance feels safest when they know where they stand. Losing that certainty creates curiosity, tension, and reflection. The shift isn't loud, but it's destabilizing, and that's why it's so effective. When you stop chasing, something subtle but powerful begins to unfold. The emotional noise fades. There are no more follow-ups, no anxious explanations, no attempts to pull them back into connection. For an avoidant, this sudden calm feels unfamiliar. They're used to distance creating pursuit, not peace. And when that expected reaction doesn't arrive, their mind starts searching for meaning. Your absence of pursuit sends a signal they don't consciously register at first, that you are emotionally self-sustained. That message challenges their belief that closeness equals dependence. Without you chasing, they lose the reassurance that they still matter simply because you're reacting. Over time, curiosity replaces relief. They begin to notice the space you left behind and question why it feels heavier than expected. Stopping the chase doesn't push them away, it removes the dynamic they relied on. And that shift quietly invites them to move closer on their own terms. They start missing you suddenly because the emotional delay finally catches up to them. Avoidants don't feel loss in the moment of separation, they feel relief. But once routines settle and the nervous system calms, the mind begins reconnecting dots it avoided before. Small, ordinary moments trigger memories of familiar silence, a shared habit, the way you made things feel stable without asking for more than they could give. What surprises them is the absence of emotional safety, not drama. They don't miss intensity, they miss consistency. And because you're no longer reaching out, there's nothing to override that feeling. Missing you shows up as restlessness, distraction, or an urge to check in casually. It feels sudden because they suppressed the attachment needs for so long. Once those defenses drop, the emotion surfaces all at once. That's when they realize distance didn't erase the bond. It just delayed their awareness of what your presence actually meant to them. The moment regret kicks in for avoidance isn't dramatic or emotional on the surface, it's quiet and internal. It happens when they realize the connection didn't end because it was unsafe, but because they couldn't stay present. Regret begins when they notice you're no longer available in the same way, not asking questions, not waiting, not holding the door open emotionally. This realization unsettles them because avoidants assume people remain accessible even after distance. When that assumption breaks, self-reflection starts. They replay moments they once minimized and see them differently, not through fear, but through absence. Regret isn't about wanting you back immediately. It's about recognizing that something meaningful was lost without being fully understood. And because avoidants struggle to express vulnerability, that regret often shows up indirectly, checking your socials, asking mutuals about you, or finding reasons to reappear casually. The regret deepens when they sense you've grown beyond the version they left behind. Avoidants fear emotional loss more than love because intimacy feels like a trap, not a gift. Love, in theory, is appealing, but closeness triggers vulnerability. And vulnerability feels unsafe. Their nervous system is wired to protect against being overwhelmed, abandoned, or engulfed. So the idea of losing you isn't scary because they love you more, but because losing access would shatter the control they rely on to feel safe. When an avoidant senses distance or absence, their mind doesn't panic over feelings of love. It panics over the uncertainty of not knowing where they stand. They fear the emotional gap, the unknown consequences of your independence, and the reality that someone else might now occupy the space they once controlled. And this fear is sharper than love because it's tied to survival patterns and self-preservation. Ironically, it's this very fear of loss that eventually draws them back quietly and cautiously, and often differently than before. If they reach out again, the key is to respond from a place of calm and clarity, not excitement or desperation. Avoidants are highly sensitive to emotional intensity. So meeting them with composure immediately shifts the dynamic. You don't need to explain, justify, or relive old conflicts. Instead, focus on clear boundaries and self-respect. This shows them that your presence isn't conditional on their behavior, it's grounded in your own emotional stability. Engage lightly, keeping interactions measured and balanced. Avoid filling silences with anxiety or chasing responses. Let curiosity and mutual respect guide the conversation, rather than attachment-driven neediness. If they sense that your energy is steady and independent, it triggers reflection and recalibration on their side. This isn't manipulation, it's showing what healthy connection looks like while protecting your well-being. By holding your ground, you create a space where an avoidant can return thoughtfully, on their own terms, rather than out of guilt or fear.